Good morning. What a privilege it is to be with you on your big day. As I've prepared for these remarks, I asked some of your professors to describe this class for me. Here's what one professor had to say. Beyond having the best academic credentials of any class to ever graduate from this law school, the students this year have been by far the most well-tempered, humored, and friendly group that I have ever taught. Another said, make no mistake, this class is competitive. Academically, they are stellar. They have become exceptional writers, thinkers, and advocates, and they have achieved outstanding success. When I asked some of you how you thought your professors would describe you, you said, I think they'll say we were slightly menacing, but in a lovable way. You went on to tell me that you are alarmists who worry about everything. One of your classmates explained, we don't even pretend to be tough. We're comfortable with our mental health issues. I also figured out that Section 2 students are definitely the personality hires of the class. And for the family and friends here, I asked the graduates to describe you. I learned you've been watching a lot of Suits and Law and Order, and you think you've earned your own law degree. At least one set of parents does not understand the concept of a mock trial and practicing opening and closings, and you believe your daughter's been playing make-believe for the last 3 years. And finally, I learned that when your child tells you he's headed to a cocktail hour at the law school, you're picturing something way more fun than it actually is. All of which made me wonder what else might our audience not understand about the law. Several weeks ago, I was at a reception for a new judge, and the headlines that day may have been a bit dramatic. As I turned away from one group of lawyers, I bumped into a friend of mine who said, good grief, I never thought we'd be having to defend the rule of law. To which I immediately responded, what? We've always had to defend the rule of law, and we always will. For those here who may not throw that term around every day, let me explain. You got here today safely because of the rule of law. On your way here, people stopped at stop signs and they obeyed the speed limits. They went on green and they stopped on red. And you didn't have to worry that maybe some people had to stop, but others didn't because they made more money. The rules apply equally to all. And later today, you may decide to have lunch at a restaurant, and you can feel at ease about the meal that you're having because there's an A on the door. Before those folks at the restaurant could serve you, the law required that the restaurant pass an inspection. And I bet that many of you have traveled to countries where you were told not to drink the water. And that's because there weren't laws there that protected the water. In some countries, it's not about the law. It's about whom you pay. And the building permits go to those who can afford to pay off the inspector. My husband and I travel to Kosovo from time to teach at a school there. And on day one, we teach the students about the rule of law through a game called Guess My Rules. But my husband is the only one who knows the rules. The game looks like soccer. There are goals on each end with the students trying to score. The students are never told the rules. But when a student breaks a rule, my husband blows the whistle and they're out of the game without any explanation. So for the first few minutes, the rules are everybody gets to play, but only the boys can kick the ball. So if a girl's caught kicking the ball, my husband blows the whistle, she's out of the game, no explanation. Then my husband changes the rules without telling them. Now the students can only kick the ball or pass the ball if they're standing still. So if they're caught moving with the ball, he blows the whistle, they're out of the game. And so it goes, with the rules changing every few minutes. The game is utter chaos because the students don't know the rules, and because my husband keeps changing the rules, and because the rules only apply to certain players. The whistle blew constantly, the students were ousted left and right, and I lost count of how many times they yelled, "This isn't fair." This frustration was what the colonists felt under King George III, and that is how we came to declare our independence. The Declaration of Independence is at its core a legal document. It's a list of one violation of law after another by a king who refused to be bound by the law. And the primary draftsman? A lawyer, 38 years old, Thomas Jefferson. And after winning our independence, our founding fathers set up a republic where the people would govern themselves through representatives they elected. As John Adams, also a lawyer, put it, we would be a government of laws and not of men. But what does that mean? It means that the rules won't be arbitrary like my husband's were and King George's were. They can't be made up on the spot. And the rules would be consistent and clear and not difficult to understand. Have you ever tried to park somewhere and not been sure whether you could? Invariably, somebody in the car will say, "Well, there's not a sign here saying we can't park here." We seem to understand that we have to be told the rules before we can be held to them. What else does it mean to be a government of laws and not of men? It means everyone is held to the same standard, regardless of wealth or power. The rules apply not just to the girls, like our game in Kosovo, not just to the poor or Black or Hispanic. Under the rule of law, the rules are known, they are clear, they don't change on a whim, and they apply to all equally. James Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. But men are not angels, and the rule of law has never stood unchallenged. It needed defending when King George ignored it. It needed defending in Brown v. Board of Education when lawyers had to argue before the Supreme Court that segregation violated the rule of law. And it needed defending when a 28-year-old Abraham Lincoln, 18 years before he would become president, delivered his Lyceum address. I hope you'll all look it up later and read it. In the speech, he cries out against mob violence and the rising tide of lawlessness. Lincoln warned, and I quote, "It is not the armies or invaders from without that will undo us. It is the collapse of respect for the rule of law, the very foundation of our liberty, which could destroy us." The speech could have been written yesterday. In fact, I sent it to my friend who thought that defending the rule of law was something new. It is not. The rule of law has never defended itself, and it never will. That task falls to lawyers, and it falls to you, graduates. Every time you bring an action to enforce a contract, you're defending the rule of law. Every slip and fall case, every wreck case, every criminal prosecution and defense. But that won't be enough. You are the keepers of order. You are the defenders and guardians of our democracy. You've spent the last 3 years studying the law. You understand how it works. Most people don't. And when they don't understand it, they don't trust it. And then they don't follow it. So who will teach them that the law is not just something written in a book, but something that protects them and protects their way of life? I hope you'll go teach it. I hope you'll talk about the rule of law with your families over the kitchen table. I hope you'll talk about the rule of law with your friends over a beer. And I hope you'll join me in classrooms across the state. And I hope you'll find Lincoln's words stirring, particularly this part of his speech. Let reverence for the laws be breathed by every American mother to the babe on her lap. Let it be taught in schools, in seminaries, and in colleges. Let it be written in spelling books and in almanacs. Let it be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in legislative halls, and enforced in courts of justice. Graduates, you have heard the expression, begin with the end in mind. And of course, it was the psalmist who first prayed, teach us to number our days. You're at the beginning of your career, but now is exactly the time to think about the end. Think about what success will mean to you on that very last day. Is it making partner? Is it becoming a judge? Is it becoming a law school professor? Will the definition also include how well you loved your families and treated your friends and served your communities? I hope so. I hope the definition will also include this, that you used your training to uphold respect for the rule of law. It is one of the noblest responsibilities you take with you today, and in answering the call, you will find real meaning in your work ahead. I left one of the best descriptions of this class for last. A member of the class below you described you as stewards. She said that the common thread that binds this class is the manner in which you shepherd your organizations and communities. You show up time and time again. The rule of law does not defend itself, but Dean Hubbard, we apparently have a very fine group of guardians in the class of 2025. Congratulations, graduates.
Thank you.